David Cameron giving that interview a little earlier. Well, with me now is Saka Al-Makhadhi, a British Arab journalist who specialises in Syria. Thanks very much for being with us. The Prime Minister there very much rejecting the idea that he's had egg on his face or is in any way diminished, saying this is important for democracy that Parliament is heard, but it has been a game changer in many ways.
It has in Britain. In Syria, I think the situation is very different. Of course it has in Britain. It's going to have profound political implications for David Cameron, but I'm more interested in what's happening in Syria. And yes, of course, the Assad regime is making hay of what's happening and, you know, they're jumping up and down saying, well, this is a victory for us. Of course, it seems like that, but it's going to be a very short win propaganda victory for the Assad regime. Of course it is, because it means that the Americans and possibly the French will possibly start airstrikes as soon as Saturday or Sunday. They're going to be free to do that a lot earlier than they would have been otherwise. And those airstrikes still look like they're about to happen anyway. So the Assad regime, if it has won any kind of victory, is a very short one thing. What
do you think the regime will now be anticipating in terms of where they are moving their forces? What are they planning, and the thought of any retaliatory action on their part?
Well, there are already allegations by the National Coalition that human shields have been found, that prisoners of war that are held by the Assad regime have been moved to the military base, the Meze military base in the west of Damascus. Now, of course, we can't verify that, but that would be a stunning reaction to what seems to be about to happen. In terms of any kind of retaliation, I think it's very hard to see the Assad regime taking any kind of retaliation against these forces. The Americans and the French and whoever else participates in the airstrikes are going to be very careful to make sure that they avoid any of the air defences that Syria has got. You know, just look at when Israel attacked some suspected missiles convoy in Syria earlier this year and a suspected weapons base close to Damascus. There was jumping up and down from the Assad regime, and the propaganda press, the state press, was furious, but there was no action taken.
The stated aim of any strikes is as a punitive action to register the West's horror and abhorrence of what Syria has allegedly done. But of course the other stated aim is to persuade, to stop, to threaten Assad from doing any more of what he's potentially been doing. Do you think that there's any credibility to that aim?
Well, what I'm really worried about is the possibility that these symbolic strikes, because that's what President Obama has said that they will be, they'll be symbolic, politically aimed strikes to say, look, the Assad regime, you cannot use chemical weapons as a tool of warfare. I'm worried that those symbolic strikes, which probably won't hurt the regime in any fundamental or material way, those strikes may, well, the Assad regime will survive them and will feel emboldened, will feel that, you know, he's won a massive victory by being able to survive these airstrikes from one of the world's strongest armies, and will then feel free to do whatever he wants, to take revenge against civilian populations if that's what he believes he can do, or to strike the rebels even harder than he has been doing at the moment. You know, there are reports of refugees flooding across the northern border into Turkey, and I heard reports that, you know, they were saying that they're more scared of Assad's retaliation than of the American airstrikes.
And in the meantime, we have the UN weapons inspectors, their fourth and final day today. They're due to report tomorrow. Do you think, in a way, things have moved on so much that the UN now does not have a role to play? Because even if it gets to the point where there's a big discussion, we know what China and Russia are likely to do, so perhaps you just park that and each country must make its separate decision.
I'm really worried that the UN weapons inspectors are going to be lame ducks now. I mean, they'll be leaving the country on Saturday. They finished their investigations today. But really, the US has said it doesn't matter what the UN says now. It doesn't matter what the weapons investigators say, because we've made up our mind. We've decided that it was the Assad regime that used chemical weapons, and really the UN weapons investigation is redundant now. And also that has a bigger part to play in the UN Security Council as well, because, you know, things have moved away from the UN, and that's simply because Russia and China will not agree with the West, because no agreement has been formed with the West. And I really wish that there had been some kind of greater dialogue, because that really is the only effective way that it seems that the war can be ended in Syria now.
Saka, always good to speak to you. Thanks very much. Saka Al-Makhadhi, British Arab journalist.